Shabbat Shalom. It's great to be here with our friends in New York and with our friends streaming from all over the world. Now, you know I say this very often, but I have to tell you, I wasn't feeling 100% this week, and as I was getting closer to Shabbat, I was like, will I give a lecture this Shabbat or not? And then this idea or this secret came so both quickly but so beautifully that I had to share it. I have to share it because, as I said, this is a teaching that is, I don't know if you could use the word esoteric, but it's very elevated. But it's one that, if you understand, it's actually amongst the most important consciousness and ways to live our lives. So first we begin with a literal story. Many of us know this week's portion begins with the story of what's called the Bikurim. Bikurim, you can call them the first fruits. What's the story? It says by the way, this applies only in the land of Israel. When you enter into the land of Israel, it's the literal story, and you have a field, and you come down to the field, and you see the first fruit, the first fig, the first date, the first fruit that comes out of the tree. You would take some sort of bamboo, some sort of string, wrap it around it, and then you would then take it to the temple, to the Beit HaMikdash in Jerusalem. Interesting story. But also, as we always ask, what is the practical light, wisdom, teaching for me here today? We live in the United States. Most of us aren't farmers. Most of us are not going to our fields and finding the first fig to bring to Jerusalem. The temple doesn't exist. So even if we had fields in Israel and we were growing them, it still wouldn't apply. What is the secret today that we, as we will see, desperately need to understand about the Bikurim? So to understand the mystery, the secret of the Bikurim, we'll begin with a very strange statement from one of the great Kabbalists from about 1,000 years ago, the Baal HaTurim. And he says the following. There's a word that appears in this week's portion that almost doesn't appear anywhere else. It's a very strange word. As we will come to see, it has a great secret behind it, but it's one that we do not find often in the writings, in the Torah, in the prophets. It says that when you come, so you are a farmer in somewhere in Israel, and you went down to your field and you found the first fruit, you would bring it to Jerusalem and you would put it in a basket. There's many ways to say the word basket, but the word that is used in this week's portion is hatene, the tene, tet nun aleph, tene, which is translated as the basket. That's a basket within which you would put the fruit. You would bring it to Jerusalem, put it in front of the Creator in the temple. Why is the word tene used? We know every letter, every word in the Torah has a secret, has a purpose, has a meaning. So the Baal HaTurim says the following. Hatene, the word basket or tene, tet nun aleph, gimatria samech, has the numerical value of the letter samech, 60. Remez, one of the hints, it hints at a practical implication. Shebikurim hu echad mishishim, that usually the first fruits should be 1 part 60th of whatever fruit you have. Okay, technical, again, as we said, not that important to us today. But then he says something very strange. He doesn't explain it, but B'ezrat Hashem will come to understand the secret. V'lachen ne'elam samech miparashat habikurim. And because of the secret of the letter samech, you will not find it appear in the entire story of the Bikurim, of the first fruit. So tene is numerical value 60, but the letter samech, 60, does not appear in the story of the Bikurim. What's wrong with the letter samech that we do not want it to appear in this entire story? And of course, most importantly, what is the secret behind it? So, to understand this, we have to go to a section in the Midrash. Most of us know the story of creation. In the story of creation, the first time, at least as it relates to people, that the letter Samech appears in the Torah, it says when Adam and Eve were being created, and then Eve was created, the first spiritually elevated couple, Vayizkor basar tachtena. The letter Samech appears when the process of creation of Eve and Adam and Eve, who are going to be the first spiritually elevated union, the letter Samech appears. And the Midrash says something very strange. Amar Rabbi Chanina Baridi, one of the great sages in Kabbalah, says, Mitchilat HaSefer ve'ad kan, from the beginning of the story of Genesis until we come to the story of the creation of Adam and Eve, Vayizgor basar tachtena, the creation of their physical body, their spiritual souls, we do not find the letter Samech. Kevan shenivret nivra Satan ima. And the letter Samech indicates the creation of the force known as Satan. Interesting. So the source of all death and destruction and pain and darkness in our world was created by the letter Samech. All darkness again and all death had ever appeared from that moment, from the time that human beings became conscious until today, we know is the force what we call Satan. How and when was it created? It was created by the letter Samech. So the letter Samech, now we have to understand the secret of it, represents the force that's called Satan. What is unique about the letter Samech? So the Kabbalists teach that the only circular letter in the ancient alphabet is the letter Samech. So, some of you might know, in the script, Samech, you can envision it simply as a circle. What's wrong with the circle? What's wrong with the letter Samech? What's wrong with Samech? And therefore, again, as something happens in this week's portion where it is completely removed, it cannot appear in the entire reading of the Bikurim, the entire reading of the first fruit. What do we know about a circle? If you compare any geometric shapes, there's something very unique about the circle, different than any other squares, rectangles, triangles. Once you start drawing with a compass, right, a perfect circle, once you start drawing the first line, the first little piece of the circle, the rest of the circle has to follow that line. Right, if you're drawing, for instance, a square, you can start the line and then you can go higher, and then make a right at some point, right? And then you can make a perfect square or a rectangle, whatever. The decision of where to change, where to move right, where to move left, where to complete the rectangle or the triangle, it's up to the creator, up to the person drawing. The circle is different than any other geometric shape. If you're creating a perfect circle, if your desire is to create a perfect circle, the first line that is the first piece of the line that is drawn necessitates all the rest of the circle. The rest of the circle will follow exactly. There will be nothing new within the circle. The circle means I started here, I must end here again, and then here again, and then here again. So now we can begin to understand both the secret of the circle, the secret of the Samech, and the secret of Satan. The secret of Satan, and this is unfortunately the world within most of us continue to live, is no real change. No real change. Of course, things change, but do they really change, right? I mean, you go to a same restaurant, right, and you really like the way they make the chicken, and you had the chicken there today, and you're going to have it there tomorrow. It might be a little bit different, but it'll be basically the same. And so too in life. You go through one day, and the next day, and the next day. Of course, there are different things. Today was sunny, tomorrow might be cloudy. But in true terms, life for most of the world is within the circle. Things are not changing. When a person, and this is why we often quote from Rav Ashlag, who says the Creator desires and loves new things, because a truly new thing, a truly new light is the most difficult thing to find in our world and to find in your life. Talk about your relationship, right? So today is better, worse, a little bit better, a little bit. You're within the circle. Most of our lives, because this is the nature of things. This is the nature of Satan. And Satan controls this world within which we live and our lives. We go through the circle of life, right? It's maybe it's a good thing, or in the jungle, right? But in our lives, it's the worst thing possible. The continuation, today from yesterday, tomorrow from today is not that different. Again, if you ask yourself the question, it's important, we're coming to Rosh Hashanah. How different is this Shabbat from the Shabbat 2.5 months ago? How different is your Sunday tomorrow going to be from a Sunday 48 weeks ago? Is it really different? Of course not. If we're honest with ourselves, we live in the circle of Satan. And that, by the way, it doesn't feel terrible, right? You're enjoying your chicken, you're enjoying your day, you're enjoying the sunshine. It's beautiful, great. But that is literally the death trap of Satan. The Satan, if you want to know what is the one thing that the Satan is scared of, we know, as we'll talk about it, B'ezrat Hashem more in Rosh Hashanah, the purpose of Rosh Hashanah is to try to defeat Satan. What is the one thing that Satan cannot abide? Something new. What does that mean? Because Satan's entire reason for being, his entire force in our world is keep doing the same. A little bit better, a little bit worse, but keep doing, keep going in this. Even your spiritual work, keep doing. Yeah, wake up every morning, make a connection. Yeah, but nothing new, nothing radical. Just keep on going. That concept within which most of the world, and that's why the great wise man, Kabbalist, King Solomon says, Ein kol chadash tachat hashemesh. You will find nothing new in this world. You will find things that are different, but in the line, or more importantly, in the circle that has always been and always will be. And it is because that most of us live both our physical and spiritual lives even within that continuation, that things cannot, chas v'shalom, will not, chas v'shalom, change. The only purpose, and that's why the first word, and this is again like there's many layers to this, and it's so beautiful. The first word in the Torah, which we know, which encompasses everything. The first, Bereshit. In the beginning, Reshit means something new. That's why we don't find this often throughout the other portions of the Torah. The word Reshit, beginning, appears again and again and again in this week's portion. Because there are two ways to live, one within which most of the world, and we can count, unfortunately, ourselves in that, we are living day to day, physically, spiritually, as we said, a little bit better, a little bit worse, but within that circle of Satan, within the Samech of Satan. And from that circle, nothing will ever change. Within that circle, again, you could be doing a lot of spiritual things in that cycle, but never breaking away from the circle of Satan. So this is where we begin our understanding. This is why the first time Satan was created, when the letter Samech first appears in the Torah, because his entire force is continue, today from yesterday, tomorrow from today. Don't change, don't be radical. Don't even expect radical change. Because once you decide, no, there's going to be a break from everything, every other Shabbat, for example, that I've ever had, once you really even think about it, desire it, now we'll talk soon about how to try to get there, Satan has no place there. Satan has only place in the circle of continuation, in the Samech. Therefore, and now we're beginning maybe to understand how powerful the Shabbat is, because this is the Shabbat of Reshit. How do you go back? How do you connect to something completely new? Completely new. How do you do it? So there's another verse in Proverbs, which if you take away just one statement from today, this should be the statement. It says, King Solomon says, Ashrei Adam shomea li, blessed is the person who hears the voice of the Creator, lishkod al daltotai yom yom, he or she who is looking for my door every single day. Lishkod al daltotai yom yom, standing by the door. What does it mean to be looking? I mean, maybe some of us have heard this verse before from Proverbs. I don't imagine anybody has spent any time in their entire lives looking for the door, or certainly not every single day. What does it mean? Lishkod al daltotai yom yom. So, if we understand that we are unfortunately living in the cycle of life, and that this Shabbat is related to last Shabbat, to the Shabbat before it, and this Sunday is going to be related to last Sunday, and this Monday is going to be related to the Sunday before it, and so on and so forth, and things are not really changing, you have to know, and this is where it begins with consciousness, that there's another parallel opportunity that is happening every single moment, right now as we sit here, as we are desiring to connect on Shabbat. There's two Shabbatot, two types of Shabbat that you can connect to. One is the circular Shabbat, right? The continuation Shabbat. The second is a break from that. Is an understanding that there's a portal, a doorway that is available for me and for you today that is radically different than any Shabbat you've ever experienced. But you have to be looking for it. You can't come on this Shabbat, for example. I'm using Shabbat as an example, but this is everything that we do, the physical work that we do, the spiritual work that we do, the reading of the Zohar that we do, the actions of sharing, our relationships, everything is within the circle. So the first thing you need to do, King Solomon says, Lishkod al daltotai yom yom, stop. Don't just begin your day, consume your day. Stop and say, I know that in this moment, there's a radical door ready for me. The Creator has prepared for me. And I can choose, and I have a choice. The unconscious choice is to continue in the circle of Satan. Yeah, I'll make my connection on the Shabbat. I'll be nice to my spouse. I'll be kind to my kids, and so on and so forth. Everything will continue. Or lishkod al daltotai yom yom, stop. I know that in this moment there is a portal to the endless. There's a portal to a radical experience of Shabbat. I stop everything. I don't consume the moment. I don't consume the time. I know that there is a door that the Creator has created for me right now, and it's available. And tomorrow, next second, there's another door, and next minute there's another door. And my desire is to enter that portal. I understand that a circular Shabbat, a Shabbat within the circle of Satan, or a connection to my spouse, or to my children, to my work, within the circle of things, is the playing field, as the Rabbah would call it, of Satan. And I need and desire to break away from that. How do you do that? Lishkod al daltotai yom yom. First, know that there's another door that most of us aren't accessing because we're in the circle, and we're fine being in the circle. But that's not why we're here. The first word in the Torah and the Kabbalists teach, the entire creation of the world was not for the circular life that most of us live and that the world lives, but rather bishvil Reshit, something new, a new experience, a new door to everything in life. Now we can even begin to understand some of the practical story. Let's think for a moment about the Bikurim. Again, assuming you were a farmer thousands of years ago when the temple existed. You're living in, let's say, Bereshit in the south, and you go down to your field and you see the first date. You see the first fig. You take a piece of, again, bamboo string, you tie it around it. You then pick that one fig. You put it in the tent, you put it in the basket. You travel for 5 weeks with one fig. You travel for 5 weeks to Jerusalem. What's happening? Most people, what happens in most farms in the world, first of all, people aren't even paying attention to the first fig. But let's say they do, oh, beautiful. My field, my fig tree has given its first fig, let me take, and you consume it. Why not? This fig is not different than the fig that will come after, or the fig that came before, the fig that I had last year, or the fig that I will have 10 years from now. But those of us who understand that no, this first fig, do you know what it has within it? It has the energy of new. And I don't want to consume the new, because the new is the essence of the light of the Creator. This is the most important and powerful fig that will ever grow in my field. I must take it to Jerusalem. What does it mean I must take it to Jerusalem? I must take it to my connection with the light of the Creator. I don't eat it. I don't consume it. I appreciate the power of the newness. Let's talk about newness. Most of us know that the reasons relationships don't work, for example, is because they are next, right? So most of us, hopefully, on the first day that we met, the person meets their soulmate, really, really like them, love them maybe even, right? Certainly on the first day they were married, really loved them, right? But then by week 5 or by year 5 or by year 30, it's not new anymore, right? It's old. And sometimes people continue to like older things, but sometimes people don't. But when you woke up this morning, for example, I'm using a relationship as an example, but it's true about everything in your life. It's true about the Shabbat. It's true about our spiritual connection. Can you imagine if you were able to wake up this morning and look at your spouse and connect to the first moment you ever met and really experience it? How much love would you experience in that moment? Probably a lot more than you're experiencing currently. Because you're connecting to the Reshit. You're connecting to the newness, to the beginning. You know, Lena, those of us who are blessed to have children, hopefully, I'm assuming most of us can remember the first time we met them, right? In the hospital, when they were first born, and you remember the love that you feel. And then, you know, children grow up. Of course, you continue to love them. But can you imagine if every time you looked at your children, you can reawake, you can connect to the first moment that you met them? And that's, again, it's not human nature. It's not the nature of the world of Satan, because Satan is, you know, okay, it's 25 years later. There's still love, but, you know, not what it was then. But that's only because you're living in the cycle of Satan, in the circle of Satan. And that's not why the world was created. Unfortunately, our world does not experience anything new. But our job, and this is the secret of Bikurim, is that we need to awaken every single day the newness, the Reshit. Then you have a real relationship. Then you have a real connection to your children. Then you have a real connection to the light of the Creator. When you woke up this morning, I'm sure most of us, when we woke up this morning, even those of us who are spiritual and we want to connect, I'm coming to another Shabbat in the Kabbalah Centre, or I'm streaming another Shabbat. Beautiful. It's better than you know, the Rav would say, people who enjoy golfing on Saturday more. Great, so you want to make a spiritual connection. But that Shabbat that you thought, or that maybe you even are experiencing, that's an old Shabbat. It's nice. It's better than probably nothing, but it's not Shabbat. We say in the section, in the Kigavna, we say, V'chulhu mit'atrin b'nishmatin chadetin, which literally means that on Shabbat we are given a new soul. What does it mean, a new soul? It means we are given the opportunity to connect to the seed, to the Reshit of our existence. You know, imagine Adam and Eve, right? When they became conscious. Like, that first moment. Oh my God, they look at the world. They look at themselves. They can't believe this is actually happening. That moment must have been filled with so much that we can't even begin to appreciate excitement and newness. The purpose of Shabbat, for example, is for me and for you to experience not just me. Can you imagine what you felt the first second you were born? You know, I was reading this week something beautiful. Babies, when they're born, they're not hungry, right? It takes some time. And there's different, you can give scientific reasons. But the truth is, the spiritual reasons children aren't hungry when they're first born is because they're in awe of the newness of this reality, of the Reshit of their existence. And you and I are meant to be living like that every single day. Can you imagine if the awe that you felt for today was the same awe that your soul experienced when you were first born into this world? This is the purpose for which we came to this world, not for the regular cycle of Satan's circle of life. Today from yesterday, tomorrow from today, same. But rather to be able to awaken the newness and to experience the newness. Let's talk about the fig, the one fig that this farmer traveling 5 weeks to Jerusalem. What's happening? As we said before, within that first fig, there is the energy of the first fig ever created. Can you imagine how much energy, how much light, how much even sweetness there must have been in the first perfect fig that the Creator brought into this world? The most powerful fig. You wouldn't want to eat that fig. It would overwhelm you probably. But if you appreciated it, can you imagine if you can see the first apple ever created? That apple had to hold within it the seed for all the billions and billions of apples ever created, the energy of that apple. This is, by the way, why Adam and Eve couldn't restrict themselves. That's a whole other conversation. But if you understand what that apple was, we spoke before about the fact that the way our relationships are supposed to be. Today, when you first saw your spouse, the gift of Reshit is when, can you imagine, to connect to the beginning, the first moment you were in love, the first moment you saw each other, the first moment of your wedding. But even deeper, can you imagine, and this is the secret, if you could experience what the first relationship ever, what Adam and Eve experienced, the first true spiritual union, how powerful that must have been, that is, and that you and I, in our relationships, can connect to that. Can you imagine the first child born into this world, to Adam and to Eve? The amount of energy that soul must have had, what that experience must have been, because it must hold within it the seeds for all the children that ever come. Everything that we experience, we can and are meant to experience the Reshit, the newest energy, not just of our own, as we said, but go even deeper. Can you imagine? And for every time you looked at your child, you experienced, as we said before, the first moment you met them. How overwhelmed with joy, the samachtar b'chol hatov, as it says in this week's portion, how much joy you would be living over, an overwhelming joy every single day of your life. And then when you came and you saw your spouse, and then you came, by the way, even to work, right? The problem is, again, we're consuming the time. We're consuming the first fruit. As an aside, the Kabbalists teach that because we don't physically have the Bikurim, we don't have the temple. So Moses said the prayers that we call them, or the moments 3 times, you have to stop 3 times a day in the morning. And you have to stop and say, what's happening now? Is today a continuation of yesterday? Or can I connect to the first moment of creation? Can you imagine if in this morning when you woke up, you are able, and consciousness will get you there, but you are able to experience what Adam and or Eve felt the first second they were conscious. What an overwhelming joy, awe that they would have for themselves, for the world. That's new. That's new. Most of us and our world treats us and forces us into the circle of Satan. And yes, it's often better than bad, but it's not new. The entire purpose of creation was to bring new light into this world and to break away from the circle of Satan. The only way to do that is to follow King Solomon's directive, Lishkod al daltotai yom yom. Stop the next time you're about to make a connection. Can you imagine if we're about to read the Torah? Can you imagine, and this is possible if you have the desire and the consciousness, I want to hear this reading of the Torah the way the Israelites first heard it from Moses. Or even more important, I want to hear this reading of the Torah the way Moses heard it from the mouth of the Creator. That's not only what's possible, that's the only purpose. If you hear the reading, and we have beautiful chevre who read them, and students who read it beautifully, but if you're listening to that reading, and as you listened last week and you will listen next week, again, it's hard to say it's nothing, but it's not the purpose. You are still residing within the circle of Satan, of next, keep going. I know what the next step will be, and the next step, and the next step. What this Shabbat is about, and this is why this leads up to Rosh Hashanah, is how to create a radical newness in our connection. And the only way to do it is first to know that it exists. That the other way, which most of us are doing our spiritual work and connections, is not the right way. It is within the circle of Satan. The Bikurim, the newness. Again, just stop for a moment, as we said, you're about to hear the reading of the Torah. Stop. What did Moses experience when he first heard, not so much the words, but experienced this light directly from the Creator? That's what my experience needs to be. Lishkod al daltotai. The Creator is giving me a different door to a different experience right now. And the next time you see your spouse, stop for a moment and say, what did I experience the first time I met them? And then go deeper. What did Adam experience or Eve experience the first time they met their soulmate? When you see your child, when you experience anything in life, stop the circle of Satan. Stop the continuation that most of us live through. And as we said before, those of us who make the prayers or the connection 3 times a day, the entire purpose of the prayers is when you wake up in the morning, don't consume that time, but stop and say, today, I don't want to live another Saturday, another Sunday. I want to connect to the energy of the first Sunday that ever existed, to the newness that breaks me away from the continuation of things, that gives me a radical new experience. It says in the Midrash that the entire creation only was created for the experience of Reshit, that first experience that we can connect to every single time, at least 3 times a day, at least on Shabbat, at least once. Imagine how much light, how much energy. And by the way, the only way that our world is going to change from the cycle of pain, suffering, and death that is the circle of Satan is to the degree that enough people are awakening Reshit, a truly new and radical experience in every one of our experiences, spiritual and physical, in this world. That's what this Shabbat is about. As we said, first of all, to make us understand that the other path, the regular path of cycle, of one after the next, a little bit better, a little bit worse, that is Satan. That is the Samech, and that's why the letter Samech will not appear in the reading of Bikurim. And the only way to begin to experience is to know that it's there. That the Creator, in this moment, right now as you sit here, there's a door the Creator has ready for you. That if you go through it, will have a radical new experience in all things. Lishkod al daltotai yom yom. You have to do the work of knowing and do the work of asking, and then you will experience. And that's the whole reason we came into this world, not to live the cycle of Satan's circle, but rather to have a Reshit, a beginning anew every moment, in every connection, with our relationship, with our children, with our spiritual work, and everything that we do. And that's where true blessings and true change and true radical experience is only there. B'ezrat Hashem, we should have the zchut to understand it, to use this tool consistently, and then we will experience new and radical blessings, new and radical experiences we've never experienced before, and bring into our world that new light that our world so desperately needs. Shabbat Shalom.